Okay, I want to have a look at how to annotate a poem. So I've got this one here. It's quite a difficult poem actually, which is, I think, makes it a good one to choose for annotation because it means hopefully you'll be able to work through it together and get some rough ideas. Because annotating is the first part of the process, looking at a poem for the very first time and just making notes, just getting some ideas about what it's actually about. So annotating first impressions, right? So I look at this poem. Before I even start to look at it in detail, I want to just get an immediate impression. Now, one immediate impression I can get is by looking at the actual shape of it, what it actually looks like. And it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? So without even reading the words, I can see the sentences are very short, and that's slightly unusual. But they're not sentences, because actually as I look at it, I can't see any punctuation. So, what's the writer trying to achieve here? I'm asking myself straight away. The writer has not put any punctuation in, and he's very short lines. Is the writer trying to somehow make it flow? Is the writer somehow, I don't know, trying to chop it up? Well, we'll find out when we look through it. Next clue we can get, maybe look at the title. Death of a Chief. A chief, that's not a word you tend to use all that often on its own, so that might give us some idea about what it's about, maybe where it's set. For me, if you talk about a chief, you may be talking about, say, somewhere in Africa. And then I look at the name of the poet, Kadambi Asalash, and I think, okay, so that's an exotic sounding name. That does not mean it's not a British person, of course, but that and chief makes me just wonder, is this something to do with Africa, perhaps? Other thing in the title, the word death. So the word death immediately tells me there could be sadness here. So I'm gonna, as I go along, highlight interesting words. So death, yeah, that's an interesting one, I think. And then chief and the name of the poet. But annotating is not just that, it's making notes, because there's no point in highlighting things and then thinking, well, why did I highlight that? So I'm going to make some notes next to it just to remind myself why I highlighted them. So death, might mean it's sad, maybe, could be. And then both those things make me think, Africa? Question mark, because I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure. It might be, might not be. Okay, right. At this stage, what I'd normally say is have a read of it. Have a read of it and get it into your head. I'm not going to do that now, simply because I want to get straight into annotating it to give you some ideas of how it's done. It's not a poem I'm very familiar with. I did have one sneaky little look at it before, but I'm sort of fresh to it myself. Okay, so straight away, pavements, lines, sorrowful silence, tears. Feels almost more like a list. So I wonder if I might be mentioning this. So I'm going to say it's a list. And also remember I said about that flow. There's no punctuation. So does this lead to it feeling like a list or feeling like it's flowing? What effect does a list have? It makes you think there's a lot of things, doesn't it? If I say Wrexham scored 5 goals on Saturday, that sounds good. But if I say, in the Wrexham game, Sean Pearson scored and James Jennings scored and Jordan Ponticelli scored and Luke Summerfield scored and Jay Harris scored, that sounds like more, even though it's the same number. A list can build up an effect. So maybe this is building up an effect here. The coffin, linked to death and sadness, off to somewhere in black. Again, black, a sad colour. So there's an atmosphere building, which I'm going to mention here. Sad atmosphere. You don't have to write full notes, as long as you know what they mean, because your annotation is just for you. And that's for coffin, for black, for death. Okay, the coffin off to somewhere in black. Behind it, the entire district involved in songs of grief. Ooh, well, that's another one, isn't it? So there's lots of sad images here. Everybody is sad about this. Also, okay, the coffin is going and the district's behind it. So I'm thinking it's a journey, like a final journey. This chief has died, everyone is sad, and he is now leaving them behind for the lifetime. Songs of grief that flow and follow a trailing gesture. Thoughts, battered syllables on lips. That's quite difficult, that, isn't it? When you're annotating, you're only getting a first impression. Don't panic if you don't understand a bit. Because the beauty of poetry is that when you write about a poem, you don't have to write about every single line. So if there's a bit you really, really can't work out, just leave it. Say good things about the rest of it, you'll be laughing. Although I would also say, this is the first step. You would then go back and read it again. Because when you go back and read it again, you might start getting ideas. Remember, with a poem, you don't have to give the final answer. You can say it might be this or it could be that. And as long as you express it like that and you use your peeing technique and you give reasons why you're thinking that, it's legitimate. So the tricky bits you don't get at first sometimes can be the bits you write about best, as when you come back to it, you start to think about it. If a poet's made something complicated, they must be trying to say something quite important. So you go back to it, see if you can work it out, but don't stress, because if you can't work it out, that's all right, just don't talk about that bit. My immediate thought here is the word battered. It's another negative word, isn't it? So is that linking with the sadness? Yeah. So I'm saying that is negative. So that might link to sadness. So, battered syllables on lips as past periods return in the farewell of the blank faces to float a fable, dream years of his reign. Oh, so now it's not sad. It's still sounding quite sad. Words like farewell tell us sad, don't they? So more sad words. But something else as well, this idea of a fable. A fable is a made-up story. Dreams. So is this perhaps making making a myth? Now this man is dead, we are going to say that in our minds he's better than maybe he really was. The path is silent to this procession. Okay, silent again makes me think about this sadness. It's creating another atmosphere as well, isn't it? There's this silent atmosphere. It's a quiet atmosphere. Oh, I said making a myth. There we are. Walking into a myth. So he is becoming a myth. Yeah, he is becoming not a real living person anymore, but someone who is judged and looked back upon as he passes alone, freed from praises, the worldly notion, the sensate achievement that follows. It's difficult, this bit, isn't it? Sometimes it's a good idea when annotating to maybe pick out some difficult words. And just say, maybe that's something I need to check out. What the heck is that? A sensate achievement that flows on tongues like a wind of changeable news. Notice because there's no punctuation, these lines will flow on. So we saw that at the end of the first verse, tattered syllables on lips as past periods return in the farewell of the blank faces to float a fable, because all one idea. And then here, we're at the bottom of the third verse, the worldly notion, this sensate achievement that flows on tongues like a wind, like changeable news. So always watch out for that. So I've annotated that first page of it. It's a tricky poem, but can you see how quite a few of the things I've spotted there, like patterns of words to create a sad atmosphere or a quiet atmosphere. Ooh, can I point out blank perhaps is another nice word for the sad atmosphere, for the quietness. So it gets noisy at the start and then he leaves it behind and it becomes more quiet. Also the sadness, that's not difficult to spot. And the sort of negative, sad words, it's not too difficult to spot. Looking at the title always gives you a clue at least. And like I said, just looking at the shape of it before you even start to annotate. So remember, annotating is only a first step. It's a first step towards understanding something. But it's worthwhile spending time doing that, because then you'll have a stronger basis to build up from. Okie doke. Have fun.